When I was grieving over the death of my father-in-law, my husband, Tom, made an unexpected declaration. I was shocked and lost for words at what he said. Now that I've got the inheritance, I don't need you, my ATM, anymore. Let's get a divorce. I couldn't grasp the meaning of his words immediately. Did he just refer to me as an ATM and say that my role was over? What do you mean? When I asked back, Tom, with a satisfied smile, explained proudly, I got an inheritance of $11 million from my dad. So, I don't need you anymore. Then he poured out his complaints about me. Do you know how uncomfortable I've been? Despite my expectations for the arranged marriage pushed by my dad, I was disappointed when a modest woman like you showed up. If that was the case, he could have simply declined the marriage. I never forced anything on him, nor did I actively pursue him. Being accused as if I were the perpetrator was unpleasant. Then why did you marry me? You could have just refused. The reason is obvious. For the money. Who else would marry someone like you? I couldn't stay silent any longer. Understood. Here, this is the divorce paper. I agreed to divorce him while keeping a certain fact to myself. It will be interesting to see how much he regrets this later. I am Amy Morgan, 42 years old, running an apparel company. I married Tom 2 years ago. He is 2 years younger than me. Our marriage began with an arranged meeting. He was the only son of Mr. Morgan, the president of the company I had long been doing business with. Initially, President Morgan saw him as the successor to the business. However, Tom had no such intention and was not particularly skilled in business. As a result, he was quickly removed from the list of successors and worked as a regular employee. What attracted me to Tom was his generosity. Since I was young, I have been attentive to details and was often described as serious. While I was often praised for my academic interests, I was also avoided for being too stiff. In past relationships, I was told, you could be more feminine. It's like dating a boss. Those words were shocking, but I always felt I might be too serious, so I had to accept it. I was often despised for lacking flexibility. I tend to get too absorbed in trying to do everything perfectly. To me, Tom seemed like someone from a different world. Wait, today was the regular day off? I was immediately surprised by Tom's attitude on our first date. We went out because Tom said he would take me to a restaurant he recommended, only to find it was closed on that day. Normally, I would be flustered by such an unexpected situation, but Tom was not. How about that diner then? He suggested another option right away. His flexible response was refreshing to someone like me, who lacks flexibility. Being with him, I might grow to respond more flexibly like him, I thought, deciding to marry Tom. I faced more opposition than expected, and some even advised me quietly that there was a more suitable partner out there. Even President Morgan, my father-in-law, didn't seem very approving. I'm sorry to hand over my son to you. Are you really okay with this? He asked. Back then, I thought, they just don't understand his good qualities. But recently, I've begun to think that maybe they were right. Shortly after we got married, Tom quit his job. He suddenly left his job without discussing it, and when his father and I asked why, he replied as if nothing was wrong. Huh? Amy earns enough, so why do I need to work? This left both his father and me speechless. I wonder why he leaves the responsibility of our finances entirely to me. Later, along with my father-in-law, I tried several times to persuade Tom, but his mindset remained unchanged. Anyway, even if I work, I won't make as much money as Amy does, said Tom, fully expecting to be supported by me, which made me consider divorce even though we had just gotten married. Perhaps if he were in his 20s, his irresponsibility might have seemed somewhat charming. However, the person showing childish behavior in front of me was a man nearing 40. Eventually, we compromised by agreeing that he would take charge of the household chores. Tom's parents had divorced a few years ago, and in the household where Tom lived before the divorce, his mother struggled with household duties. I didn't learn to do household chores because my mom couldn't do anything. He seemed to blame his mother for his inability to do housework. As he said, at first, Tom was utterly incapable of doing household chores. But after patiently teaching him and offering praise, he eventually managed to handle basic tasks. Despite his mediocre skills in housework, Tom was quite pleased with himself. By taking care of the home, I allow you to work outside, so I want some appreciation, he said. When Tom showed his confident profile, I felt a bit irritated, but I knew any inappropriate comments could ruin the progress. Right? I'm genuinely saved by your support, I replied with a wry smile. Though there were frustrating moments, I felt we were getting along fairly well overall. A year after our marriage, a change came into our lives. My father-in-law adopted a child. He's a 9-year-old boy named David, who seemed like any ordinary kid. My father-in-law is a man who doesn't engage in unnecessary actions. When we were alone, I asked him about the sudden adoption. While keeping it a secret, he revealed the reason. David was the son of a subordinate with whom he had a deep friendship. There had been interactions between the families, and for my father-in-law, David was as precious as a grandson. I just want him to be happy. Recently, David's parents died in an accident. They had married almost eloping when they were young, and David had no relatives to turn to. Hence, going to an institution seemed unavoidable. I don't know if David will feel happy living with me, but if he wishes, I'd like to live with him. That's why he decided to adopt David. That's a decision typical of you, sir. Tom and I don't have children, so we have relatively more freedom with our time. Please let us know if you need any help. My father-in-law showed a grateful smile to these words. Fortunately, he sometimes asked for help as I had suggested. We took care of David only when he couldn't return home from work or had unavoidable commitments. Initially, David was somewhat nervous, but he soon became attached to us. He appears to have a very friendly nature. Or perhaps he's trying his best to adapt to the new environment. Contemplating his feelings, I was filled with complex emotions. On the other hand, Tom seemed not to favor this situation much. He hadn't shown much enthusiasm about welcoming David. It's understandable to have mixed feelings about his father bringing an unknown child into the family. But after a thorough discussion with Tom, it turned out he was only concerned about one thing. What's the intention behind adopting? My inheritance might get reduced because of the division. I thought I would have it all to myself. Hearing this, I couldn't hide my surprise. Thomas' concern was not about David's feelings, but about the potential reduction in his share of the inheritance. I'll have a talk with Dad. I can't accept this. After making that statement, Tom went to have a direct conversation with his father. When Tom returned, he was in a cheerful mood, contrary to my anxiety. Seeing Tom smile, I cautiously asked, "How did it go?" "It's all good. It won't affect my share." "Really? How come?" I thought that an adopted child would have the same inheritance rights, so I was puzzled by his words. Tom explained with a hint of pride. "Dad said he'll have David renounce his inheritance rights." Well, of course. I'm his only son, after all. Considering how much his father loved David, it seemed unlikely that he would leave him with nothing. I felt something was off but couldn't quite put my finger on it. Though I was not convinced, Tom was relieved and happy on his own. Well, if my father-in-law said so, there must be a reason. Anyway, his father was still in his 60s. Worrying about inheritance should be a concern for the future. In fact, there was a higher chance that I would divorce Tom before his father's passing. With these thoughts, I remained relaxed. However, that time came sooner than expected. A year later, my father-in-law passed away in a traffic accident. I hadn't imagined losing him so soon. I had known his father longer than Tom had, and he was a person worthy of respect, both in business and personal life. When I heard the news, I couldn't stop my tears due to the profound sense of loss. With swollen eyes and a headache, I arranged the funeral. Tom was supposed to be the chief mourner, but he appeared to be in a daze, showing no signs of grief. He was probably still in shock from the sudden loss of his father. I had the responsibility to ensure his father's final send-off was done with care, so I endured my tears. During the funeral, it was particularly hard to see David crying, even though I was also deeply hurt. Meanwhile, Tom still showed no tears. At that point, I began to sense something was amiss. Tom seemed restless rather than mournful. Sometime after the funeral, the reason became clear. "Tom, why don't you seem sad about your father's death?" The conversation, which started out of concern for Thomas' lack of tears, led to an unexpected response. "Well, of course, I'm sad, but the joy overwhelms that sadness." Could it be overflowing joy? What? Amy, do you get it? Dad was a company president. It's clear he had assets. How much do you think he left behind? What? It was a merciless revelation. I had noticed his vacant expression, but he had been laughing about the inheritance even before the funeral, without any sorrow for his father's death. No way. How can you think like that? It's obvious. My parents were divorced, and my mother has no right to inherit. I'm the only blood-related child, and since David will renounce his inheritance, well, it all goes to me. How could I not be happy? Tom's face had a restrained smile. Looking at him, I felt an urge to lash out. He was genuinely delighted about his father's passing. Unbelievable. That's heartless. Say what you want. I felt a strong desire to leave the room. But before that, there was something I needed to tell Tom related to David's situation. After my father-in-law's death, it became temporarily my responsibility to take care of David. If the situation remained unchanged, he would eventually be sent to an institution. I had a strong desire to raise him with my own hands. About David, "Oh, you can take him. No problem at all," Tom surprisingly agreed smoothly, which shocked me. He added with a smile, "What you want to do is up to you. You have nothing to do with me anymore." What? At that moment, Tom showed me a piece of paper. It was a green divorce paper. "Why is this here?" His words shocked me, leaving me speechless. "I have an inheritance now, so I no longer need an ATM like you. Let's get a divorce," he said. I couldn't grasp the meaning of his words immediately. Did he just call me an ATM and say that my role was over? "What do you mean?" Tom, smiling contently, explained. "I inherited $11 million from my dad, so I don't need you anymore." Tom continued, "Now I can be free from work. I don't have to be considerate towards you or handle the bothersome chores myself. How joyful is that?" While saying this, Tom didn't hide his happiness. Witnessing his behavior, I felt deep disappointment. The inheritance was money obtained through my father-in-law's death. Yet, he was excited as if he had won the lottery. I had already sensed it, but now there was not a trace of sorrow or mourning for his father in Tom. He seemed genuinely immersed in his joy. However, money is a scary thing. It's not rare for someone who comes into a great fortune to change their personality. Perhaps Tom was just overly excited at the moment because of the money in front of him. "Calm down, Tom. Let's talk." Saying this, I placed my hand on his shoulder, but Tom brushed my hand off and yelled at me angrily. "Shut up, you uptight woman." Uptight? I married you because of my dad's introduction and because you were a female president. I've always felt suffocated around you. It's been hard. Thus, Tom continued to unilaterally express his grievances. "Do you know how uncomfortable I've been? Despite my expectations for the arranged marriage pushed by my dad, I was disappointed when a modest woman like you showed up. If that was the case, he could have simply declined the marriage. I never forced anything on him, nor did I actively pursue him. Being accused as if I were the perpetrator was unpleasant. Then why did you marry me? You could have just refused. The reason is obvious. For the money. Who else would marry someone like you?" Tom wore a sneering smile. "Essentially, he got married to me because of my wealth." Prefacing that it was all in the past, Tom revealed a shocking truth. "Actually, I had a significant amount of debt." "What?" "My dad said if I married you and changed my ways, you would take care of that debt. With such an offer, how could I refuse marriage?" So, Tom never loved me. He married me solely for financial reasons. Well, it wasn't fun, but thanks to you, my debt is cleared. I'm grateful. Seeing Tom laugh loudly and crudely, I made up my mind. I will no longer have any association with him. I also held back the final advice I wanted to give him. It was swallowed in my decision to move on. And so I quietly began to fill out the divorce papers. My pen moved smoothly, without hesitation. Tom seemed a bit surprised by my decisiveness to go through with the divorce. Are you really going through with the divorce? Yes, this is the completed divorce paper. After completing the form, I felt a certain sense of fulfillment. Now we are strangers to each other, right? Now it doesn't matter what happens. Whether you're with that kid or I'm with a new girlfriend, it's all free. Seeing Tom happy, I at least understood that he hadn't been unfaithful during our marriage. I had no suspicions, but that was one point in his favor. If you're this happy, maybe we should have gotten divorced earlier. I had no choice. I needed the money. I watched as Tom put the divorce papers in his bag and hurried out of the house. Living in this house where I had shared life with Tom and continuing there with David didn't feel right. I decided it was best to start anew. It felt like the perfect timing to move then, so I decided to sell the house. I preferred to live closer to my parents' home. It would be a support system for both David and me. David would have to change schools, but he consented, saying, "It's no problem." Though there was a bit of sadness, this allowed me to freely proceed with looking for a new place. After carefully considering many options, I made a decision. The most crucial factors were easy access to my parents' home and a good location. The price was high, but considering David, I was confident it was the right choice. David came along to view the property and was thrilled, exclaiming, "This is luxurious." The rooms were spacious, and the interior had a thoughtful design. There was ample storage space, and to my surprise, there was also a pool. I didn't need a pool myself, but David was very excited about it. Wow, amazing. If David is happy, that's enough for me. And so, we moved to our new home. At first, we both took time to get used to it, but gradually the new house became our place of solace. Then one day, I received a message from Tom. He seemed very troubled and wanted to meet urgently to apologize. I had a rough idea why he was making such a proposal suddenly, though I had the option to ignore him. I decided to meet him since he insisted. I left David with my mother and headed to the diner I had chosen. Tom appeared to have arrived before me. Sitting in a corner of the diner, he looked pale as if he was about to cry. "Amy," as he stood up upon seeing me, I looked back at him coldly. "What do you want? We're strangers now. Please don't say that. Actually, Dad had debts. Damn, I never thought Dad would." "What about it? You received an inheritance of $11 million, right? Just pay it off with that." "Well, the thing is, the debt is more than that." It turned out the debt exceeded the $11 million inheritance. As a result, Tom, who inherited both the assets and debts, was now burdened with the debt. I didn't sign up to inherit debt. Tom looked downcast. "Please, Amy, you must have some decent money, right? We were once married, so can't you help me?" Tom pleaded with a servile smile. Did this man not remember what he said before? After looking down on me and calling me an ATM? Why would he ask for help from me then? It's quite something that he's even reached out to me. Over the phone, he said he wanted to apologize in person, but he hasn't apologized yet. You really despised our marriage, didn't you? You said you regretted it, so why are you asking for help now? Well, at that time, I never thought things would turn out like this. His nonchalance is astounding. He thought he no longer needed my money, but when he needed it again, he crawled back to me. Unfortunately, I can't meet your expectations. I don't have any money. What? No, I know your business is doing well. You're lying. He was in a difficult situation because of his own actions, and he shouldn't even complain to someone unrelated like me. I'm not lying. I just don't have the spare funds to lend to you. Even an ATM won't give out money if there's no prospect of getting it back, right? Tom seemed to remember what he had previously said to me and looked a bit guilty. Still, he didn't apologize, too full of pride. Why are you so cold? Don't you care about me at all? Remember what you said at the divorce? Once we divorce, we're strangers. We have nothing to do with each other, that's what you said. I couldn't understand why he acted like he was the victim. His brazenness was astonishing, as if he has a special talent for forgetting inconvenient truths. I then played back his words from that time. Yeah, I might have said something like that, but I didn't mean it, you know? I never imagined things would turn out like this. Tom leaned on the table, looking dejected. I hoped there was something left, but Dad's lawyer said I am not the beneficiary of his life insurance. I see. Haha. My laughter made Tom look at me in surprise. Don't tell me, Amy. Did Dad leave something to you? No, not to me. Why did you laugh, then? I just felt a bit sorry for you. Life insurance is one way to avoid inheriting debt. That's why my father-in-law had David renounce his inheritance and used life insurance to leave something for him. In fact, it turned out David was the beneficiary of the life insurance. Is that all you wanted to talk about? If there's nothing else, I'm leaving. There's nothing I can do for you. Wait, can we start over? I was just confused because of my dad's issues at that time, but you were always focused on money, weren't you? I see right through you. Tom tried to deny it, but I was no longer going to be deceived. After all, I owe him nothing anymore. Sorry, someone important is waiting for me at home. With that, I left the diner. I heard Tom crying out behind me, but to me, it was just irrelevant noise. I needed to hurry home. David might be waiting for me, hungry, or maybe he's already eaten. I hurried towards the station. I don't know much about Tom's current situation, but I heard he's juggling multiple part-time jobs to pay off his debt. He couldn't get hired as a full-time employee anywhere due to lack of qualifications and motivation. Once, while on my way to a client, I saw Tom working at a store. He looked significantly older and exhausted, a stark transformation caused by his previous lifestyle of relying on others' finances. I feel no sympathy for him. On the other hand, David and I are living peaceful days. We have arguments and disputes sometimes, but I take it as a sign that David is opening up to me. I plan to support him until he becomes independent. That's the last wish of my father-in-law and my current purpose in life.